Cool. Good morning, everybody. I'm Matteo Brunati, and for living, I do ethical hacking, computer forensics, and other, I think, interesting things. Today, I will talk about computer forensics in the mobile world, and so we will see some real scenarios. We will first understand what's computer mobile for. And computer forensics in general, and then we'll go through some examples. So let's introduce myself. I do design and development of IT security solutions. I do ethical hacking, as I said, computer forensics, some research on cryptocurrencies and other stuff. I do have certifications which I acquired lately, and I did some publications in the past. Okay, backward. Okay, so in this talk I'm going to focus on digital forensics. And so, what's digital forensics? It's a science which allows a technician to identify, acquire, preserve, document, investigate, and replicate some evidences which might be used in trial or in some legal aspects. Computer forensics might be divided in some categories, which are, for example, mobile forensics, network forensics, black box forensics. So if you need to acquire a black box of an airplane, you need to stick to some rules, let's say, and you need to use some best practices. So digital forensics allows us to turn normal evidences in legal evidences. There are lots of best practices. Lately, there has been an ISO published in 2012, which is ISO 70037, and it's focused on the acquisition part of the digital forensics science. These other ISOs standards are for the analysis and investigation, but they are still drafts. So there's still a lot to do, and we still stick to best practices for the moment. So what is a digital evidence? It's something which allows us to have probative information, okay, in digital form, and which authenticity and integrity might be verified anytime. So this is a very important rule and assumption, and we need during digital forensics operations, we need to take actions in order to assure that this might be can be done. And so for these properties, we may use digital evidences also in trials. For example, what may we acquire as a digital evidence? We may acquire emails, documents, metadata. So, for example, for images, we may acquire EXIF information. For documents such as spreadsheets or Word documents, we may acquire who did that document, when, in which computer, and such on. Internet browser history, it's very interesting when you need to do network forensics analysis, or, for example, in order to demonstrate that a person went to some places which shouldn't be visited. About mobile phone, you may acquire the SIM card or the memory. For example, in computer, you may acquire the RAM, even in the mobile, the hard disk or the SSD. Oh, here it's a typo. For example, in cars or in mobile devices as well, you may need GPS tracks in order to see where the user went and in order to demonstrate that the people, for example, a person, shouldn't be in that place at that time. Media files and, as I said before, iCraft's black box. They are very interesting pieces to analyze. Most of the time they use very ancient, let's say, technology because they need to be robust and certified. So one of the important things about doing forensics acquisition is the chain of custody. What's the chain of custody? For example, for law enforcement seizure scenario, the chain of custody is that piece of information or the paper trail which demonstrates all the chain of people and operations which has been taken on that device, on that digital information, which goes from the seizure, custody, control, transfer, analysis of the digital information, and its disposition. On the other side, when you don't need to interact with law enforcement, maybe you might need less steps. For example, when you are dealing with private investigations, you might, for example, just need an acquisition with witnesses and, for example, a certified formal documentation. So you do the acquisition of the device, and then through some specific steps, you certify that that acquisition was done with those persons, with that device, physical device, in that date. What's happening lately? So digital forensics has been very popular lately, and lots of people are requiring it, even though in some cases it's not necessary, mostly because also due to what it's called the CSI syndrome or code. And so basically what's happening is that people know about computer forensics. They don't really know what can be done with it, but since they have seen it in the CSI television, and this is documented publicly, and lots of people actually require me digital forensics analysis because they have seen it in television. That's quite crazy, I think. And so they know that something can be done. And the problem is, most of the time, they think can be done more than what it's actually doable. Why? Because they see in the TV show that they just point and click and find some evidences or some demonstrations of the killing and such on. In the real life, this is obviously not always the case. Sometimes you do find something more than what you expect, but yeah, just don't believe to the TV show always. Digital forensics might be even used to protect yourself. Let me explain myself. When you do a threat modeling for a company, you might want to see where you might be attacked. So which are the threats for your company, for your people? For example, you might have direct threats, and with competitive companies, criminal organizations, ex-employees who wants to make some damage on you, so they encrypt data, they stole data, or they erase it. Private detective, so for example, for private detective or let's say also lost PC. So if someone has acquired your computer, acquired your mobile phone, what they really have acquired. So did you thought about analyzing your PC, analyzing your mobile phone, and see if what is seen by the others with an digital forensics acquisition and investigation? Indirect threats, for example, lost PC, as I said, accidental data loss, as we will see later, data when it's cancelled, it's not always gone. You may retrieve it with digital forensics or computer forensics techniques. Malware, if a malware attacks you, what can be done in order to analyze why the malware succeeded in the attack, and sometimes how to retrieve the lost data. So, in order to do forensics acquisitions, as we said, you must proceed with some specific steps. For example, the first thing to do is to identify precisely the device you are acquiring. For example, if you have a mobile phone, would be better to get the IMEI, the brand, the serial number, and all these informations are needed in order to specify what you are acquiring and the scope of the acquisition. Then, a very important thing is to leave the device in the state it is. If you find a device which is shut off, please don't turn it on. Okay? If you find a device which is turned on, don't shut off, don't power it off. Because, for example, for mobile devices, if an iPhone has been stolen or an ex-employee just went away, he might remotely erase your data through iCloud, for example. So if you turn on the device, the data which is inside, and the device connects to the cloud and it's erased before you can acquire it. This is just an example. And so if you find the device turned off, please, yeah.
But then you have the same problem if you need to turn it on. If you don't turn it off, you could remotely connect.
Yeah, that's why you actually, if it's turned on, you should try to isolate it. And by isolating it, there are several things you may do. For example, to put the device in airplane mode, but this might modify the phone state. So another thing to do is that the digital forensics acquisitions just try to leave the device as it is, because if something is modified, then your acquisition might be wrong or just not accepted. So if it's turned off, for example, for a mobile phone, try remove the battery, remove the SIM card, and remove the SD card, because you don't want to change the phone status. If it's turned on, try to isolate, put it in airplane mode, use a Faraday cage. If you don't have a Faraday cage, we will see some mobile phone Faraday cage later. Use a tin foil. It doesn't work perfectly, but it's more than nothing. Or use a jammer. We'll say some words about jammer lately. When possible, use write blocker. When doing a forensics acquisition, you just want to read from the device. You don't want to write to the device. And so there are some specific hardware which are certified to acquire a device, just reading the device and blocking by hardware the writes to the device. And there are write blockers for hard disks, for SSDs, or for mobile phone as well. If you don't have an hardware write blocker, at least use a software write blocker. So operating system which by configuration don't, for example, when you connect something, don't mount it or don't access it but by accident. And then, very important, acquire also the device date and time. For example, if it's turned on, because if it's turned off, don't turn it on to acquire the date and the time. This is very important when you lately will do the analysis, because you need to know when you find something, you need to know when it's done that thing, and so you need to know the date and time, if there are some shifts in the date and time configuration on the device or not. How long do I have? 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm half away. For example, some Faraday bag. This is tablet bag. There are also for mobile phones. There are different factors and models. You put the device inside the bag, maybe turn it on, with a cable connected, so that the cable can be attached to your computer or write blocker, and you may access the device while it is open, but isolated from the network. A Faraday box is something like this. This is quite complex, but basically you put the device inside the box. You may have isolated gloves through which you may touch the device, which you can see through the camera. And so this is a Faraday box used, for example, in operations when you got several devices that needs to be turned on all together, or some other specific situations. These are some write blockers. We do use this one, Ultrabook V5, which is for IDE and SATA hard drives. This is, for example, a mobile phone write blocker. It's actually a whole suite. There's no the picture, but when you buy it, this is the ultimate version, so it's the top of the gamma. And you buy it, you receive also a bag full of jacks in order to acquire the device. In some versions, you might get also some pins in order to acquire the chipset of the device. So if you open the mobile phone, you just attach the chip to these things, and these things does a hardware acquisition from the chip. Okay. By the way, these are not used anymore so much, because now what's happening is that you use the software for the acquisition on the PC, and they just give you a small box which you attach the mobile phone to, and you acquire the mobile phone through the PC, because this one has basically, in this particular case, Cellbright's UFED used Windows XP just crafted for this particular device. Now you can use whatever you want. For example, hardware tools, jammers. There should be said some words on jammers. It's not always allowed to use them. It depends on the laws of your country, obviously. This is a mobile jammer. This is a jammer that you might put, for example, in a room or in a car and just leave it there. This jammer is basically of the size of the cigarette pocket. And this is an old one. New ones, for example, have 6 antennas instead of 3. So you may go to a most variety of frequencies. Mind using jammer, because then everything which is near you, it's jammed. And so Mobile devices components. So what you may acquire from a mobile device. You have device information, so IMEI, device serial number, and such on. You have SIM card, and so you might need to do a SIM card cloning or SIM card acquisition. If you do, for example, SIM card cloning is done when you need to power on the device with the SIM card inside. But since you don't want to modify the original one, you take off the SIM card, you clone it, you put the clone inside the mobile phone, and then you turn on the mobile phone. You may acquire the flash card, which is the internal memory of the phone, and there are typically three acquisitions, which are the logic acquisition, the file system, and the physical. From this to this one, you may acquire more information. So the logic acquisition is just files, which are seen, for example, from the backup program. File system is the file system of the device, and physical acquisition is, for example, when you acquire an hard drive, just acquire everything, also the physical state of the hard drive, not just what the operating system sees. And then you have, for example, external SSD, the mass storage. In some cases, you might need to acquire the cloud. It depends on the situation. So some information, for example, are stored in Dropbox, iCloud, and such on. It's not always a good thing to acquire it. It depends on the law. So let's go for some property tools. Okay, the cell-by TUFED, it's the one I showed you before with the Ragarite form. Similar things is micro-systemation XRY. This is, seems to be quite used by law enforcement, military forces, and such on. With this system, they say you might also crack encrypted programs, encrypted partitions of mobile phones, and such on. And then there are some other software forensics tools. For example, I would talk about a lot about VIA Forensics, which is a company based in the US. They have done lots of work on Android, and part of it is also open source. What are, for example, the open source solutions to acquire a device? Talking about a Linux machine, which I usually use and prefer instead of using Windows. You may use your own, but mine to configure it in order, for example, to not mount automatically devices when you attach them. Or, for example, you might use some operating system distributions target just to mobile devices, such as Santoku. This is a distribution by VIA Forensics for mobile forensics. Then you have other distributions for other types. I should go on very quickly. Let's go to some examples. And so let's then take some questions. Okay, about what to analyze, which tools. For example, when you analyze iOS, you might use iPhone Backup Analyzer 2. It's a tool which I use very often because you just acquire the PC. In the PC, you've got the iPhone backup, and so you don't need to acquire most of the time. You don't need to acquire the physical device in order, for example, to acquire the address book, emails, SMS, photos on the mobile device. You just acquire the iPhone backup on the PC, and you most of the time got everything. You might need to do carving. Carving, it's a technique which allows you to get files deleted on the file system. So it doesn't go to ask to the file system, give me that file. We just take the hardware image or the raw image of the device, and we go through the image, search for something which is called magic number, which identify a file. So you have magic numbers for the head of the file and for the tail of the file. We swipe all the hardware image of the device, and we extract those files. Let's see. Okay, there are some problems with SSD. I don't have the time now to talk about this, but yeah, you have got some links, and there are problems with wear leveling and trim. Basically, there are problems about how the hardware SSD manage the data which is deleted on the device. You don't have such problems with normal hard drives, because when you delete an information, that file or information just stays there. And with the time, it will be replaced or rewrite. With SSD, the controller, hardware controller, actually allows to rewrite the information without writing a new file on it or deleting that information. So let's talk about some examples. For example, using this software, which is from VR Forensics. It's the open source edition of AF Logic, which allows you to see this kind of information. The paid one allows you to see way more without routing the device. So you may get WhatsApp messages, Viber messages, emails without routing the Android device. So this is the output, and these are some files. We see that in this output we have the address book. In this one we have the calls, and this output is actually for the SMS. Here we don't have SMSs because in my case I don't use the operating system SMS app. I use another one which is text secure, and this particular device don't allow you to acquire this SMS, which is actually encrypted on the device. So even if you will be able to acquire the SMS databases, you will need to crack it or to use the password. What about WhatsApp? You might use, for example, an Android app. For rooted application, it just works right away. For non-rooted devices, you might do some steps, but you just get the WhatsApp messages from it. One thing I should say is that installing these apps obviously modify the state of the mobile phone. So you need to know what's happening, and you, for example, use this software if you are allowed to modify the mobile phone state. Otherwise, you just might need to analyze the backup of the mobile phone or the mobile phone acquisitions with other software. Some anti-forensics, for example, for Android. Okay, there's forensics. With forensics, we may acquire lots of data and information, but there are some tricks that might be used to not leave traces on the device. For example, in order to not leave network traffic traces, you might use Orbot with plus Allware or a Firefox add-on, which is the Tor implementation for Android. For SMS, you might use Text Secure, Chat Secure, Telegram with secure chats. I prefer Text Secure. It's very reliable. Text Secure and Redphone, they are from Whisper Systems. They are both open source. I think very good software, but it's my opinion. I didn't analyze the source code, so there might be something, but yeah, it's still good, better than what you got out of the box. For steganography, you might use PixelNot, for example, which is from the Android Guard project. Also Orbot, Chat Secure, Oftel, Pixelbot, they are all from this project. Pixelbot allows you to put steganographed text messages inside images. In order to clean the device, I find a very good solution, CC Cleaner, which is the Android version of the PC one. Some words, and then, okay, there are other solutions. Some words on Telegram. So I try to use secret chats in order to sneak around and send secret images. But what happens if you acquire the mobile phone, or if you acquire the SSD of the mobile phone where you use Telegram? It actually turned out that doing a carving on the SSD and the internal storage image acquisition, you got the mobile phone photos taken from the Telegram app during a secure chat. So if using a secure chat, you do okay, take a photo, and then you do a carving on the image acquisition, you find all of them. So pay attention when you use these tools, because yeah, you need to know what's happening under the hood. Yeah.
Is it just the pictures or also text messages?
I didn't go through text messages. In that case, I just need the pictures, or at least an evidence which Telegram was used to. In order to get the text messages of Telegram, you need to access the app part or the app installation directory, which if the device is not rooted, you cannot get. So that's one thing. But sometimes it's not necessary to get everything from the device. You just need to get one evidence to say, okay, you was using Telegram. So let's see, I'm done. If there are any questions, this is one last picture. This company is one of the company I work with. They are hiring. If you want to do this stuff or the stuff I will talk about in the last talk, just ask me, ask them, and we are truly searching for new people. And even if you don't have experience, you might get one with us. So just let's talk with us. Okay, thanks. Yes.
Thank you. Now, if there are other questions, because okay, one announced also for next speakers. I mean, if there is some question from the audience, please repeat the question, because otherwise, in the streaming and video, we will not hear. Do you have questions? I have a small question. I mean, maybe it could be a nice follow-up. Actually, it could be also maybe an interesting idea for future, let's say, research or develop something if it is not done. I was wondering, in the like jamming or Faraday cage approach, basically you assume that the phone is not a malicious phone. I mean, it's not someone that is aware that could be victim of forensics analysis. Is this right?
Well, yeah, it's. You might use also on the field. So, for example, for law enforcement, when you go take a bad guy, and the bad guy has the mobile phone in the pocket, if you acquire the mobile phone, and the mobile phone is unknown, you just put the mobile phone in the Faraday bag right away. Yeah,
what I'm saying is that if it is some very, let's say, smart and malicious guy and very bad guy, then it could have something on the phone that detect the fact that is currently not connected to the network, even though the phone is online and the network is officially reachable. It's not like in plane mode, but then you cannot contact the cell tower or whatever about the network. Then you can, I don't know, encrypt something or delete something.
That's true.
Right? I mean, are there solutions to, I mean, to let the phone, the device, believe that it's connected but not passing data or whatever.
Something that you might do is to behave as, for example. Okay. Thanks. So, for example, if the mobile phone is just connected through the Wi-Fi, you might put a route access point in order to make believe that the device is connected to the internet, but it's not. If the mobile phone, for example, uses the cellular,
completely transparent mode.
yeah, that should be done in completely transparent mode. There are tools which I will talk about later in the next presentations. For example, the Pineapple Mark V, which is a tool we use to do these things transparently. Another thing you might do in order to impersonificate a cellular network is to use SDR technologies to make a fake cellular network so that the mobile phone attached to you and connects to that fake mobile network, and so you may then just do whatever you want then. So that can be done. It can be done more easily with 2G than 3G or 4Gs, but it can be done. It's all the authorized software you might buy.
Can common people?
Yeah, now common bad guy or common law enforcement may do this because SDR technology is very cheap. You might buy a basic SDR card for 15 euros on Amazon. It's just a normal DVB tuner, and then you program that tuner through the software. And so you make a fake mobile.
It's legal. It's done by everyone. Can we do it?
I mean, for research it's done. And the other thing is, how do you ensure that cellular phone is just a rogue cellular phone? Since it's just wireless, how can you ensure that you are doing this? So there are some other aspects, but yeah, from as far as I know, but I might be wrong, this is still legal, at least in Italy.
So thanks. There are other questions? If not, let's thank Matteo again.